I need somebody help, not just anybody help. You know I need someone help. When I was younger, so much younger than today, I never needed anybody's help in any way. Now these days are gone and I'm not so self-assured. Now I find I've changed my mind and opened up the doors. Help me if you can, I'm feeling down, and I do appreciate you being around. Help me get my feet back on the ground. Won't you please help me?
This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Raw Deal, right here on Revolution Radio, Studio B, this 14th day of April, 2025, the day before Tax Day. Have an unusual show today. I have Russ Winter with me and Bill Bonatati, expecting to be joined as well by Ron Avery and by Susan Bradford, where we're going to be discussing issues of the use of the internet to harass and cyberbully, where we've been subjected to an extreme form by, I might call them the Three Stooges, three individuals who seem to have completely lost their way, some of whom are playing others in their own group for their own benefit. It's a fascinating story. That will begin after we talk about a few stories of the day that are of remarkable interest. The first, and I want to get their comments on each of these stories, there is a Politico has published a piece, the happy-go-lucky Jewish group that connects Trump and Putin, where Trump's real estate world meets a top religious ally of the Kremlin. I have a friend who's been telling me for a long time, let's put it more than a year, that Trump and Putin are Lubavitchers, which is an extreme version of a Judaic superiority movement. I mean, it's out Zionist as Zionist. Here it begins as follows. Chabad at Port Washington, a Jewish community center on Long Island's Manhasset Bay, sits in a squat brick edifice across from a Shell gas station in a strip mall. The center is an unexceptional building on an unexceptional street, save for one thing. Some of the shortest routes between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin run straight through it. 2 decades ago, as the Russian president was set about consolidating power on one side of the world, he embarked on a project to supplant his country's existing Jewish civil society and replace it with a parallel structure loyal to him. On the other side of the world, the brash Manhattan developer was working to get a piece of the massive flows of capital that were fleeing the former Soviet Union in search of stable assets in the West, especially real estate, and seeking partners in New York with ties to the region. Their respective ambitions led the two men, along with Trump's future son-in-law, Jared Kushner, to build a set of close overlapping relationship in the small world that intersects on Chabad, an international Hasidic movement most people have never heard of. Starting in 1999, Putin enlisted two of his closest confidants oligarchs, Lev Leviv and Roman Abramovich, who had gone to become Chabad's biggest patrons worldwide, to create the Federation of Jewish Communities of Russia under the leadership of Chabad Rabbi Berel Lazar, who had come to be known as Putin's rabbi. A few hours later, Trump would seek out Russian projects and capital by joining forces with a partnership called Bayrak Sapir, led by Soviet immigrants Tevfik Arov, Felix Sater, and Temir Sapir, who maintained close ties to Chabad. The company's ventures would lead to multiple lawsuits alleging fraud and criminal investigation of a condo project in Manhattan. Meanwhile, the links between Trump and Chabad kept piling up. In 2007, Trump hosted the wedding of Samer's daughter and Leviv's right-hand man at Mar-a-Lago, his Palm Beach resort. A few months after the ceremony, Leviv met Trump to discuss potential deals in Moscow and then hosted a bris for the new couple's first son at the holiest site in Chabad Judaism. Trump attended the bris along with Kushner, who had gone to buy a $300 million building from Leviv and marry Ivanka Trump, who had formed a close relationship with Abramovich's wife, Dasha Zhukova. Zhukova would host a power couple in Russia in 2014 and reportedly attend Trump's inauguration as their guest. With the help of this transatlantic diaspora and some globe-trotting real estate moguls, Trump Tower and Moscow's Red Square can feel at times like part of the same tight-knit neighborhood. Now with Trump in the Oval Office, having proclaimed his desire to reorient the global order around improved U.S. relation with Putin's government, and as the FBI probes a possibility of improper coordination between Trump associates and the Kremlin, that small world has suddenly taken on an outsized importance. Just a bit more, and I want to get your comment. Trump's kind of Jews. Founded in Lithuania in 1775, the Chabad Lubavitch movement today has adherents numbering in the 5 or perhaps 6 figures. But the movement acts in numbers that make up for an enthusiasm, and it is known for practicing a particularly joyous form of Judaism. Mort Klein, president of the Zionist Organization of America, recalled having this trait impressed upon him during one family wedding, at which the 2 tables occupied by his first cousins, Chabad rabbis, put the rest of the celebrants to shame. They were dancing up a storm, these guys. I thought they were black. Instead, they're just black hat, Hines said, referring to their traditional Hasidic garb. Despite its small size, Chabad has grown to be the most sprawling Jewish institute in the world, with a presence in over 1,000 far-flung cities, including locales like Kathmandu and Hanoi, with few full-time Jewish residents. The movement is known for these outposts called Chabad houses, which function as community centers open to all Jews. Take any forsaken city in the world, you have a McDonald's and a Chabad house, explained Ron Torresian, a Jewish public relations executive in New York. Now, Susan was here and then disappeared. I wanted to get Susan's comments right off the bat in her absence. Russ, your thoughts? I mean,
interesting that it was founded in 1775 because that corresponds to Jacob Frank showing up in Offenburg outside of Frankfurt with the Frankists, the Sabbatean Frankists. And they just built, basically, the Rothschilds just absorbed an extensive intelligence network that the Frankists had set up in Poland, in Vienna, throughout Germany, France, but particularly in the Rhineland-Palatine area and down into Baden. And going forward in history, you'll see an incredible number of what I call turtles on the fence post plucked from that area, and that's a fusion of Chabad, Freemasonry. It's amazing that they kind of started at the same time. So I think it's an offshoot of Sabbatean Frankism. And also, the other thing I would mention is that a lot of the wealth that the Chabad movement acquired was after the fall of the Soviet Union. So they really benefited from that because they were able to pick up bargains, loot the organized looting of Russian industry, getting it under their control. There's kind of some infighting going on among the Russian oligarchs, and Putin looks like he kind of picked the Chabad wing, got rid of the other Jews that were on the scene. Those are just some observations that I have about him. And then I think they're taking the same template they used to loot the Soviet Union and bring it to the United States. I think that's what Trump's all about, the same template.
Russ, I want to get more from you, but before we go there, Bill, your thoughts about Putin and Trump both being Chabad?
Yeah, well, I think we can tell a tree by the fruit it bears, and I think Russ has obviously got this wired. What I can add to it is just a cursory observation. If you deny the Holocaust in Russia, you can get 5 years. Who's in charge? Who you can't criticize, right? So then you have an autonomous region, oblast, called Birobidzhan in Russia, which is a Jewish autonomous region, and that's the city of, right? So I think also it's very obvious we have a bizarre scenario where you have a Russian browser called Yandex where we can learn all about many things that have been censored from Google, including Holocaust revisionism, Sandy Hook, whatever. But if you cite what's in their own browser on the Holocaust revisionism, you can be arrested. What a bizarre scenario. If you ask me. You also don't forget you had Telegram was originally started, registered in Russia, and then there was the issue of the fellow, I can't remember his name, who got arrested because of some bizarre scenario where they were interrogating and trying to expose some of the communication there that he was facilitating, trying to find it illegal. So what did that do to Telegram? I can tell you it totally stopped a lot of the chats, because people were afraid, which was the reason they did it. And the last thing I would say is, let's not forget JFK's Secret Society speech in 1961, where he exposed the monolithic conspiracy and how they act covertly, which anyone can find on YouTube. And we know that was obviously one of the reasons why he was assassinated, along with many other things that Jim has touched on. I won't expand on right now. So I'd like to leave it at that. And Deutsche Bank, who bailed out Russian Deutsche Bank, bailed out Trump 5 times, the Rothschild Bank once. So obviously there's a lot of banking favorism, weird shenanigans going on there, if you ask me. Sure. Go ahead, Jim.
Keith Rogers, who's my co-host on Mondays, has joined us by phone. Susan, before I invite Keith's comments, I'd like your thoughts. I mean, this is a story in Politico. It's pretty comprehensive. Explain that Trump and Putin are both Chabad Lubavitchers. I have a friend who had deep intel who's been telling me this for like a year and a half, and I just haven't known what to make of it. What do you make of it?
You're asking me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I've known that that Trump has been involved in what I would call a transnational crime syndicate. He's a key player in I would say, alleged international money laundering. After the Soviet Union was disbanded at the end of World War II, the federal government began plowing money into Russia. And this was done by way of the USAID, by way of these different developmental organizations that were set up during the first Bush and the Clinton administrations. And among the individuals involved with facilitating that money transfer was Wilbur Ross, who was a leading banker for the Rothschilds and Donald Trump. So their network actually helped set up this new Russian oligarchy, which came in, and there was at the end of the Cold War, the Russian Christian communists had reclaimed power within the Kremlin. And then afterwards, through a shock therapy that was devised by Larry Summers, president of Harvard, former economist for the World Bank, this created a disruption that allowed these new kind of kleptocrats to take over the Kremlin. And then in turn, our money helped make them, transform them into billionaire oligarchs. And these oligarchs kind of looted the Russian economy. So these individuals were kind of created by people who were close to Trump. And I'd like to think that, Trump is doing right by the American people, but it's my view that he has been involved with them and has profited from them for many, many years.
Of course, he said he'd be the strongest Israel supporter the presidency has ever seen, and he's gone far beyond anyone's wildest expectation. Keith, what do you think about this report from Politico that both Putin and Trump are Chabad Lubavitchers, and what's your take?
Well, good morning, James. I guess you can hear me, I hope.
Yep.
Okay. Excuse me. Yeah, I got a video on that where it shows like Trump's Trump Hotel with all of his awards on the office wall and all the stuff like that from Shabbat and other various awards. We have to remember, though, that when Putin came into power, he basically threw a lot of them oligarchs out who in turn went to Ukraine. But it's important to know that Putin's, like everyone else, has got this tie-in with the Shabbat, now these other ones there. When the U.S. sanctions were on Russia, the ones that were complaining the most were the oligarchs because their money or assets were frozen too. And so certain sanctions and stuff were, what do you call it, appropriately moved and stuff to make sure that these people couldn't, or they wouldn't have their funds attached and stuff. Of course, this, if you know, a lot of with the Soviets and stuff, there's a huge black market over there. And this is one primary goal there, but it's a given there that no matter where you go, David Irving, the historian years ago, had said that, well, we could look at Argentina for one, Mexico now, but over time, these guys slowly weasel themselves into every aspect of government to take it over. So it doesn't matter whether you're French or American, whatever like that, you know, that they all seem to tie back into this incredible, huge organization, call it the Shabbat or whatever like that, you know. But they're the ones that keep the money flowing and stuff. Go ahead.
What I want to know is, as a theology, what is its ideology? What are the principles that motivate or would affect politics? Russ, I want to hear.
There's a lot of inversion. So Frankism is kind of an inverted belief that you can pretty much sin all you want and get away with murder, so to speak, to advance your cause. So if you can't be pure, you can't be all bad, then why not just be evil? That's kind of
really, John.
It's also kind of Masonic.
I love it. Tell us more.
But think of the advantages that it gives you over the rest of humanity. If you have no scruples and no morals,
yeah,
you can just do anything you want. You know.
Yeah, because just to toss in an observation, the nature of morality is to not employ certain methods using people merely as means that immoral people do all the time, you know, like lie, cheat, murder, rape. Those are all using other persons to accomplish your own goal.
It's a group think, and the term for it is actually called egregore. And egregore is a very powerful spiritual thing that if a group of people are all kind of vibrating a certain way, it really, and then they support each other like the Frankists do, aka Shabbat, then it gives them a tremendous amount of power to organize and to influence and to take control and to gain power. And I believe that's what's happened to the world. My definition was pretty close to what Susan said when she came on. That's kind of exactly what I said, Susan, how you described it. Interesting that you mentioned U.S. aid. I didn't really know about that, but now that makes sense because you got to have finance. You've got to be able to draw on Western finance to do your takeovers on the cheap, because they turned out, and the Soviet Union, when it collapsed, they turned out vouchers. Everybody got vouchers, right? But nobody knew what to do with them. Well, the Shabbat oligarchs got organized around it and bought them like crazy. You know, they just pick them up for pennies on the dollars, and then that gave them the currency to then go and take over the industries that were being privatized, the oil, because a lot of the resources. And I think these sanctions that are on these guys is kind of a misnomer because they've got all kinds of outlets to Swiss banks, New York. In fact, Trump himself was a facilitator of a lot of this money from Shabbat and the Russian oligarchs.
Well, Ron Avery has joined us. Ron, we've been discussing a new article from Politico saying that Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump have something in common. The world's largely unaware of. They're both members of this special group called the Chabad Lubavitchers. And I have a friend who's deep intel, has been telling me this year and a half, 2 years. I just haven't known what to make of it. Would you have any thoughts about this and what it might mean, Ron, off the top of your head? Russ seems to know a fair amount, and Susan too. I'm learning. I'm in a position of learning. Have you any thoughts about this?
The only thing I can think of is I don't care. What's wrong with having a relationship with Putin? I kind of like Putin myself.
No, Ron, it's not. Yeah, I like Putin too. They belong to a group. It's a kind of an extraordinary group. You may remember in Brooklyn recently there was a raid on the Chad Lubavitchers.
Tunnel Fortress.
Yeah. They're what do they call it? Home hotel. Their location there in Brooklyn, because they found bloody mattresses. It looked as though there'd been pedophilia taking place down in the basement. And the next thing we knew, they had a cement truck filling it all up, dumping a whole load of concrete in there. And as Russ has been explaining, Lubavitchers seem to be a variation of a Frankist orientation that says you can do not, if you can't be a perfect person, if you're going to be a sinner anyway, why not go all the way and have no moral constraints whatsoever? So the idea is,
I just want to know if they're in Skull and Bones or not.
Well, this is much more powerful.
All our presidents have to be in Skull and Bones. I mean, and then are we surprised at anything? I mean, I think people are just making up stuff. I just don't get it. I don't get why all this stuff comes out. We know that the whole system is corrupt. The global system is corrupt. I mean, there's some corruption everywhere. I mean, we're supposed to be surprised that they're. And I don't even care. I like I say, I kind of like Putin. I kind of like, Trump. And the problem with Trump is his blind support of the unlawful state of Israel. Now, other than that, I want to have a barbecue with both of those guys. And just have a good time.
Yeah, well, maybe you could play a role as Savoy's Goy.
Bill, let me bring you back in, Bill, for further thoughts of yours. Go ahead, Bill.
Hey, guys. First, I want to say hello to Ron and Susan and Keith. Pleasure to meet you all. And we've had some email communication. I'm glad to be on the show with you all. I don't know what you heard, what I said originally. I defer, like Jim, I'm in a learning curve on this. But I do think we could tell a tree by the fruit it bears. We like personalities, but it's follow the money. You want to first rule in any crime scene investigation is follow the money. People can present themselves as likable. It doesn't mean that they're not working against us. So I think Susan's done a really good job of that. I look forward to her book coming out. And what I did touch on, just to real quick, I think we can look at the fruit the tree is bearing. And I touched on quickly, we have the autonomous oblast in Russia called I know, correct me if I'm not pronouncing this correctly, this capital is Birobidzhad, something of that nature. I could be butchering that pronunciation. We also have an interesting situation, for those who just came in, we have Yandex, which is a Russian browser, which cites Holocaust revisionism. But if you talk Holocaust revisionism in Russia, you can get 5 years. So what does that tell you? Who's in charge? Boom. Then we have the last thing I'll say, Jim, is just to repeat, I don't know if Ron heard this or Susan, we had the Telegram situation, which was started in Russia, and that fellow, I can't remember his name, who started it, got prosecuted and had to move that to, was it United Emirates? I forget where he moved the headquarters. But being in Telegram and live chats, that totally crushed the communication. A lot of people were afraid then, which is why they do this, fear. They rule by fear. And Telegram became sort of a dead zone. for a lot of chatting, which is really sad because he used to be
Bill.
really active. Go ahead.
Thanks, Bill. Now, contrary to Ron, I think this makes an enormous difference. I'm just trying to figure out what the difference is it makes. And now, it's all utterly consistent with Joaquin's research, where he's got Donald Trump in the pedophilia category. I resisted this forever, but I've seen now studies that are rather detailed. Henry Makow has been very good on this, publishing about, his having raped a 13-year-old girl, and there's a host of other to go along with it. There's a conjecture out there that he even has had sex with Ivanka, and that Ivanka and Jared can use that as a form of blackmail over Trump. But this Bina Chabad Lubavitcher makes an enormous difference. I just got to figure out what the hell the difference is. Keith, you have thoughts?
Well, I did want to back up to U.S. aid in Russia. Remember that Russia gave U.S. aid to boot in 2011 and 2012. The FSB has been really critical of that, and even as far as February 6th of 2025, under this Doge stuff, Russia welcomed the USAID cuts over there. So it was correctly said there about Larry Summers, but also remember that Jeffrey Sachs was involved in that too, and it's a break coming up here.
Yeah, hold that thought. We'll be right back. This is a Raw Deal, a very special edition. We'll be right back. This discussion just a tad here about the Chabad Lubavitchers before we turn to this question of cyberbullying and harassment, which is a problem we're confronting as a group. Chabad adherents, different from other Hasidic Jews on numerous small points of custom, including the tendency of Chabad men to wear fedoras instead of fur hats. Many adherents believe the movement's last living leader, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who died in 1994, is the Messiah, and some believe he is still alive. Chabad followers are also, according to Klein, remarkable fundraisers. Now, this Schneerson guy is really quite remarkable. I gave a presentation at my last Volkswagen Conspiracies conference on Schneerson, and when many were telling him he was the Messiah, the Jewish Messiah, he said, no, he couldn't be the Messiah because there are still Christians alive on earth. So they believe that it's the destiny of Judaism to either kill or extinguish or promote all Christians on earth. I mean, this is bizarre. And we know, of course, Donald Trump went to Israel to the memorial for Schneerson when he died. I'm just saying, this is just weird shit, in my opinion. Russ, you pick up on that.
Well, he's, to be exact, he's the basically Messianic people, and the Jews have always had Messianic movements because that's their big thing. Take over the world, rule from Jerusalem, and to be exact, they don't want to kill all non-Jews, but they want to enslave a bunch of them. They want to kill people like us. I mean, we'll be exterminated, and you can see signs of that already. I mean, it looks to me like the friggin' Cheka has taken over in the United States and just heading in that direction. The El Salvador stuff. Just every time you turn around, there's some kind of hint of a future roundup or some kind of anti-Semitism bizarre, all that kind of stuff.
For those who may be unaware, in the wake of the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, millions of Russians who were deemed unsavory, inappropriate, not politically correct by the Bolsheviks were brought into a basement, stripped naked, and shot in the back of the head. Each one had a bullet in the back of the head, and went on and on and on. So what Russ is talking about is serious. Could we have a purge, a Czech-style purge right here in the USA? You want to think not. But I'm telling you, I'm seeing signs here that are disturbing me profoundly. Keith.
Yeah, I'd like to hear what Sharon thinks about that.
I do too, sure. Susan.
Do you want my opinion?
Everyone gets my name wrong. Well, the syndicate has been responsible for really every communist revolution, every war since really the 1700s. So they have killed maybe tens to maybe hundreds of millions of people over the course of their quest for world domination. And this agenda ultimately traces back to China, as I've reported. But I think ultimately their goal is to create like a new Venice, which is going to have Israel at the center of this new world order. They have been working in concert with Russia and China to this end. And I think that they want to essentially eclipse the United States and then rise in its place. And they seem to have this resentment against Christians, since I think the Christian monarchs and Christian civilizations threw the Jews out over usury. And I think they have this attitude now: we will never be thrown out again. We'll never be humiliated again. We're going to be in control, and they want to have all the money and maybe to humiliate other people. So it seems to be a grievance that, has been turned on everyone else.
Right. It also kind of stems back to how the Romans treated them. So they kind of look at Christianity as the new Rome. That's long-standing.
And they have long memories, right? They never forgive. They never forget, and they never forgive. So they want vengeance. Keith, your thoughts?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on what I was saying there about USAID and everything. We also have to remember that there's all these 15-minute cities throughout Moscow and stuff in these little subdivisions and stuff. I have a video of 2030 Ukraine, where Ukraine, and this makes me wonder about the billions being sent to Ukraine, are in fact the United States tax dollars building up this new utopia over there in Ukraine. You have to read the Pale of Settlement to understand the abstract hatred that our alleged kosher friends from Israel, which goes back to that leaked report that the Jews in fact were Khazars with reverse migration plans to Ukraine. That in fact, if our tax dollars are not building up this utopia, because in that video, it shows that all this AI tech and stuff, all the facial ID stuff, everything, fingerprints, name it. And of course, now, as you see, as I warned everyone before, that this people demanding this immigration stuff was going to spark this new biometric and biosecurity stuff, to where countries now are enabling this for alleged security issues. Remember, these are the same governments, whether it's through the Blair Doctrine or all this stuff, that caused all these wars, the 37 million refugees just from the Middle East, not to forget all the CIA, USAID activities south of our border here, which has destroyed the economies and such of all those Central and Latin American countries. To force the immigration issue, which is all part of the UN, because you can read that document. It's PDF, UN Forced Immigration. But it just seems to me like under the Trump administration, they're usurping what power the WEF had, and that the United States is going to take it over. That other video that we've played before there, Jim, about the human rights are to be eliminated. They would have to do that if they're bringing in their one world religion and stuff, which is odd here too, because I noticed that Georgia, the state of Georgia here, is the first state to introduce a bill against Hindophobia. And remember, under Trump's last administration, he increased the green cards from India 45%, in which all those U.S. corporations were then telling their employees that they got the pink slip, but they had to train their replacement who actually came from India, so that we can all press one on our phones now for English.
And what do you make of that? Is that because the tech giants feel the Indians are the best people to have in their various positions and dealing with the public and on technical issues? Is that what it's all about, sort of a recruitment program for a big tech?
Well, in a way there, Jim. Remember Amdocs, that was his name, Carl Cameron did during right after 9/11 about the Israeli base Intel Corporation. Remember all these COINTEL, not COINTEL, but telcos, Paul Singer and those guys that are invested heavily in through all the communications throughout Latin America and the Caribbean islands. It's a takeover of all information. I had a video this morning I was watching from Bibi talking about all the medications and stuff that are administered now through the state of Israel. As an American, I think no matter where you come from, you would never assign any health or any information of any of your citizens to a foreign government. In this case, especially Israel. But anyway, we have the NSA that shares all raw data of U.S. citizens with Israel. It's a total takeover.
Trump has just pulled us out of the WHO, which I applaud. I mean, that's obviously a good thing. Bill, your thoughts?
Well, I'm learning a lot, guys. What I'd like to add, I recall this. Stu Peters published an episode. There was a rabbi admits the child-sized mattresses from Chabad Jew tunnels are stained with blood from rituals performed on dead bodies by Jews in tunnels.
Dead bodies don't bleed, so it's not gonna. In other words, go ahead. No, there's something odd about this story. Go ahead.
Fresh, they do.
Yeah, they're cutting open and they're dissecting and they're performing rituals.
Right.
This was an interview. Yeah. This was an interview.
Why would we assume they had to be dead bodies? Why couldn't they be live?
Well, they could have been. So the New York City Chabad Tunnel Temple, child sex abuse, NYPD synagogue, Jews, Chabad Lubavitch Rabbi Yehuda Krinsky. I heard this guy talk, and you guys reminded me of it. I was trying to find a link. So I used Yandex, and this is what I come up with, where I haven't watched Stu's episode. So this was something this rabbi acknowledged that they were doing, and that these rituals are performed to sort of bizarrely to the dead to bring them to life in a form. It's really strange. But anyway, I don't know if anyone else is familiar with that. Of course, we've heard about the child abuse and the adrenochrome issues and organ harvesting.
Yeah, but I'm wanting to know if those are related to Chabad. Is Chabad into that and child sacrifice organ?
Chabad is really into supremacy. They're the ultimate supremacists. That's one way to think of it.
Yeah.
And as far as the Indians are also supremacists, so they're pretty natural fit, at least as useful idiots.
So could the Indians be integrated, become Chabad and Lubavitchers?
Well, they kind of have some similar ideas. They sort of have a caste system, and they like to lord over people. And they're also useful idiots, and they're very pro-Zionist. They like it. They like Israel, and vice versa. And I don't know what role India is going to play in the near future. They might kind of start incorporating them more into their plans. But meanwhile, they're bringing in a lot of supremacists into the United States, and it's going to filtrate into American politics.
Ron, let me ask, if you hear that Trump is actually a Jewish supremacist, would that affect your view of him? And if Putin too? I mean, I'm telling you, I find it very disturbing. Your thoughts? You, Ron.
Oh, me? Okay.
Ron, is Donald Trump a Jewish supremacist? Answer now.
He's Jewish.
Well, again, I think he's in favor of it, like the modern evangelical church. These people that call themselves Jews, they're really not Jews. That's the very first mistake. And we're all calling them Jews. They're not Jews. The New Testament is clear that these people are not Jews. And that's why I've changed what I term them as synagoguans, because that's mainly what they do. They go to the synagogue, or they're either related to somebody that goes to the synagogue. And as far as the Messiah, whether there's one living or what, the whole catch is that a Messiah is not what Christians think of as a Messiah.
Right.
You know, he's the Christian view of a Messiah is one that sacrifices themselves for the sins of the world and redeems all of mankind and translates them into the kingdom of heaven on earth. That's what true Christianity would be. But the synagoguan view of a Messiah is one who simply conquers the world and does it rapidly and in such a way that no one can deny that they are the dictator of the world. And that involves killing enemies of the synagoguans. And so it's not, Netanyahu is a good example. Talk about a Messiah figure. He fits the Messiah figure. He's stomping and crashing and he don't care. If he just did it faster and Gaza-fied the whole world, then he would be the Messiah.
Yeah,
well, you know, that's very good, Ron. I think that's valuable. So Schneerson was supposed to be the conqueror, the leader, like the president of the world, roughly speaking. Susan, your thoughts?
I just wanted to add about this Indian connection. The reason why they're working so closely with India is, remember that India was the destination for the East India Company.
Yes.
The East India Company created Yale University, and Yale University was behind the Chinese Communist Revolution and behind all of these wider objectives. So India is working hand in hand with the Israeli project because the financial interests that control Israel also control India. So that's why they're being used to bring into our country to impose a technocracy. They have a level of hierarchy and like maybe a lack of appreciation for our values, for our freedoms, and impose it. Go ahead.
You're suggesting that Yale is not just an Ivy League institution, but has a very special role and maybe distinctive in various respects politically.
Yes, Harvard does as well. In fact, they provide the intellectual capital for this New World Order, and Harvard has been used to funnel money to these foreign countries. They advise the foreign governments, and they also are involved with channeling the money to them.
It's very odd. The latest report, Harvard is having to borrow $750 million to keep going because of the constraints that are being imposed now, wiping out the DEI. I'm all for that, Ron. You talk about programs Trump's undertaking that I applaud. The DEI, the Dodge, getting men out of women's sports, which appears to be very difficult. There's a lot of resistance on that. It's appalling that this continues to this day. Keith. Oh, Susan. Yeah, go ahead first, then Keith. Susan.
I'm sorry. I think that's part of the Hegelian dialectic. So they will, the same interests that are promoting DEI will then fundraise with the Republicans and the Democrats. The Republicans will campaign off of that, raise money, and then once they're in power, they will shoot it down. But the same people are ultimately in control, and by shooting it down, you're essentially leading the public to believe, okay, that the problem is over, things are changing for the better.
Right. That's important. I call it the salami strategy, but yeah, it's Hegelian dialectic. And I had a meme that I put on one of our shows. I think Jim really liked it. It showed a Trojan horse. It showed a big MAGA castle, showed two guys coming out of the MAGA castle. There's a Trojan horse out there, and the Trojan horse says, there are two genders. There are only two genders. And the MAGA guys go, based, and they pull the Trojan horse into the castle, and inside the Trojan horse are Israeli first.
Yeah. Keith, go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, I wanted to finish.
Yeah, good one, Keith.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that Jewish Business News where it says that Trump converted to Judaism in 2017. On the article itself, it says so Trump had to prove he was serious about this and was only accepted to a conversion program by a rabbi after he was rejected 3 times. As far as what Susan said, India, as you know, all through this Gaza conflict like that, has been supplying arms to Israel, who in turn in 2023 had increased their arms sales or exports to Latin America 30%. Now, remember, this is during the so-called conflict. I know for a fact here that Congress wouldn't allow all this money going to Latin American stuff, and so they use this division stuff because as long as it's for Israel, the arms will flow. And, of course, they just make money off of that. So when they say that Israel's a flat-top carrier, to bypass the Boland Amendment, which would be arming these regimes and stuff like that, especially Colombia, they would show that. And again, with this, with the Harvard, you remember Wharton College, that's another prime one, but Yale is where most of the CIA graduates come from. What's important to realize out of this is that we have this, as Bill Moyer once talked about, the shadow government. This goes back to Oliver North's days, even with the FEMA, to have this continuity of government, you know. That continuity of government was the one that they openly said they had plans to suspend the Constitution, all this. And I think this is interesting in the way that was said. I think it was Louis Frieda, or how do you pronounce his name there, but we have government by journalism. You have, say, Trump that gets, say, $100,000 or $400,000 a year. He can donate it to whatever like that because he's getting $100 million from Israel or from Israelis, you know. But the fact out of that is, out of all this money going out and stuff, this DEI program you mentioned, it hasn't stopped at all. I was on the internet the other night looking up some searches there that USAID is very active right now throughout all these countries in Africa and stuff, pushing their it's under HIV, which I believe I mentioned to you before there, Jim, it sounds more like it's a tracking program. And of course, male circumcision. This is why you hear this rumors about 50 some odd $1 million worth of condoms and stuff like that, you know. But it's a massive depopulation program. And then remember, Trump in his last administration was decriminalizing homosexuality. The USAID thing, like I say, it's part of this HIV stuff, which was part of that spike protein. And then we have the other issue of how all of these governments seem to be working in union with one another. The one thing I do have to say, though, is that they would not be directly attacking Russia if Russia was playing along with all this stuff. Remember, Mr. Putin doesn't allow the LGBT stuff in their schools. They openly raid the gay nightclubs and stuff like that. But Putin has made a statement on that. It's saying, look, he says, whatever you want to do it at home. Don't do it on the streets. Remember the Pussy Riot and all that stuff, you know.
That ties into the salami strategy. That's what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want you to reiterate, Russ, the simplest version of the salami strategy, to wit.
Well, I thought the meme was a good one. I like to use memes because that's sort of comprehensible for people without getting too philosophical. But you have two dialectics, and a lot of times left-right dialectic. The leftist,
don't be too abstract here. Be more specific.
Yeah, the leftist kind of it's problem, reaction, solution. The leftists dream up all kinds of arrested development bullshit.
Yeah, but
because arrested development of humanity is a big part of Frankism and Zionism, I think. So then you have the other side comes in and kind of corrects some of the arrested development stuff, but then they bring in more control and more dictatorial power and more hardcore.
When I was hired at Duluth, the head of the department was Jewish. He was into philosophy and religion, and one of our conversations was most interesting, where he observed that in Judaism, you have lots of restrictions on food, but virtually none on sex. Whereas in Christianity, there are lots of restrictions on sex, but virtually none on food. And I mean, he captured something there that is very much to the heart of the matter. Not for nothing is Tel Aviv the gay capital of the universe, right?
What happens when you get guys like me that are into all that?
Susan.
Well, I think the goal is to weaken the United States and is to strengthen Russia, China, and Israel. So that's why they're promoting all of these, like multiple genders, hundreds of genders, to kind of weaken the fabric of the country and to destabilize us. And whereas, Putin, I'm sure, knows that those things are destabilizing, but the goal is not to destabilize Russia. So I believe that the Chabad Lubavitchers are already in control of Russia, is to destabilize us. And I think that's the difference.
And they also destabilize other parts of the world. There's a really interesting story of how, Iran, for instance, was kind of coming into the modern age. And I forget the guy's name. The guy in 1954 they overthrew and put the Shah in there was very actively developing Iran. And then the CIA comes in because they don't want Iran to develop. They're trying to, it's arrested development. So they throw the sort of the nationalist out because it's also a threat to Israel and install the Shah. And then the Shah kind of ends up trying to develop the country because he was kind of a patriot. He ended up being kind of a patriot. And then they got rid of him and brought in the religious element that really arrested the country, set Iran back. That's a good example.
Bill.
Of an arrested development strategy being employed by these particular individuals.
Bill, your thoughts?
Well, I think we could look at Putin was one of the first young global leaders on the Klaus Schwab that graduated from that program. I think, personally, I agree with Susan and what you all are saying. The Hegelian dialect to divide and conquer, a lot of these narratives we hear are put out just for that. What's really happening behind the scenes could be entirely different. And I always like to go back to, you have the 10 kingdoms, the technocracy, the Club of Rome, working through the secret societies, the Pilgrim Society. You guys know what I'm talking about. Your audience may be familiar. And so I see this going back in bloodlines back. Certainly the Freemason, first grand 33-degree Freemason was Nimrod, Babylon. You go back to Samaritan times and people have traced the bloodlines back. That most of these presidents and rulers of the world are related on bloodline levels. And I think a lot of what we're seeing in the press is to create narratives that may not be entirely true. So I'll leave it at that and, go from there.
Keith.
Yeah, there is a distinct amount of this altogether. I have that other video about the Trojan horse too, but what's important to realize here is that we have these, you can call them oligarchs, globalists, whatever like that. Remember, Mr. Putin threatened Klaus Schwab, saying that he knew what they were up to and they won't be genociding the people. That's important to know there because we have targeted individuals, i.e. the Orthodox Christians, who are being decimated by this Ukraine war.
Okay.
Every time you think of Lindsey Graham talking about fighting to the last Ukrainian, Graham has endorsed more killing than Reverend Jones there.
Yeah.
Down in Guyana,
We're up against another break, and we're going to turn to digital issues, censorship, cyber harassment. We'll be right back. Some in our audience may find it difficult to believe, but each of us has been a target of attacks by this fellow who calls himself Victor Hugo Vaca II. He's gone on a surprising number of shows, it suggests that he has a handler who's booking him on all these shows. I'm personally convinced this is a propaganda campaign. He's trying to create divisions within the truth community. He's attacking all kinds of people, making all kinds of false claims. Here, for example, you see him, talking about me, Sandy Hook, Alex Jones. We're all supposed to have.
And I realized that even though I thought I was
thrown the case that he's showing himself in a uniform of a midshipman in Annapolis. He's advertising himself as a veteran. From the sources I have, he actually was booted out of Annapolis. He was never commissioned an officer. He's not served as a veteran. That's one kind of claim that may bring a handle here. But just to lay the background, Victor has something on the order of 440 videos that he's put out attacking me since 17 December when he had a falling out with Ryan Davidson when we were doing a show called Truth versus News, where Victor was doing his shtick. It's the Jews, it's the Jews, it's the Jews. And Brian was suggesting, well, the situation is actually a bit more nuanced. You got the Pilgrim Society, you got the Vatican, you got the Jews Against Genocide. And he excused himself from further discussion, which I respected. It was when I discovered that Victor was now attacking Brian as a coward that I became very upset, because Brian is a sensational guy. He's a mountain of integrity. He's a private investigator. He's given 2 affidavits to me about Sandy Hook that are the most important I have. He went into the Connecticut State Police files, discovered that there were not only no photographs substantiating mass murder, but there were lots of photographs substantiating wasn't even an operating school. And out of consciousness of guilt, the state police had removed the metadata from the photographs to make it more difficult to introduce as evidence in a court of law. But I say that removal of the metadata by itself is evidence of guilt on the part of the Connecticut State Police, who appear to have been running the event behind the scene on behalf of FEMA. So, I've done a lot of expose about Sandy Hook. Fabricated lawsuit was brought against me for 3 sentences in the book, where I declared a death certificate to be fake, a death certificate that the plaintiff, who calls himself Leonard Posner, had shared with a research colleague by the name of Kelly Watt, that was incomplete, had no file number, no state, no town certification, where it turns out under Connecticut law, not even parents are allowed to have incomplete death certificates. In any case, when they fabricated a case against me based on my declaration that it was fake, by claiming that these 3 sentences in the book, Nobody Died at Sandy Hook, where I brought together 13 experts, including 6 PhDs, and we established it had been a FEMA drill. The school had been closed by 2008, and there were no students or teachers there, for which we already had the FEMA manual. He was suing me for the book. Ultimately, it was to gain possession of the book, because when Amazon had banned it less than a month after it had gone on sale in 2015 and sold nearly 500 copies, I released it for free as a PDF. So I tried to figure out a way to staunch the PDF, and they brought this lawsuit against me for defamation. Now, they attached to the lawsuit a complete death certificate and a file number, state and town certification, and they said, bizarrely, it was not materially different from the one published in the book, when obviously material differences are legally significant differences. It was hugely. It wasn't even remotely the same. But I had this massive evidence. I have now much, much more. I thought going to court would be a good way of certifying it, just as Bill has been suggesting that the fact that Wolfgang brought a Freedom of Information Act to get the dash cam videos of the state police which show where evacuation is supposed to be taking place. There's no evacuation because there were no other students there, because it was an abandoned building. By having it certified through a judicial process, it obviously carries greater legal weight. Well, now, I went in naively assuming I was going to have a judge who was going to operate in accordance with the law. I knew enough about this that for a defamation case, it was supposed to present all of my views, ask the plaintiff whether he agreed with all of those views, and if he didn't agree with all those views, then because there were disputed facts, it had to go to a jury trial. Instead, the judge at the scheduling conference said all the evidence I had that nobody died at Sandy Hook was, get this, irrelevant to the truth or accuracy of the death certificate. When it says right on the death certificate, the decedent died at Sandy Hook Elementary School on 14 December 2012 of multiple gunshot wounds. So this was both legally and logically absurd. And the case proceeded from there. My rights were violated right and left. Now, this guy who claims to be a lawyer, I guess he's some sort of lawyer, R. Win Young, claims that he has discerned that I threw the case. He's never read the book. He's never looked at any of my legal briefs. He's never watched any of my videos, but he discerned I threw the case. And I point out what an absurdity this is when I took the case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court and when I'm still in court seeking to have it reversed. And Bill Bonatotti realized it was absurd, where Bill had assisted me in some of my most recent motions to open sanctions pursuant to extrinsic fraud and fraud against the court, and to recuse Judge Frank Remington, sent copies of these to Win. And Bill, when was that? I mean, Win has to have known for a long time that what he's peddling here is complete legal rubbish. He compounds the matter by claiming an attorney far more prominent than he, by the name of Todd Callender, his law offices in Boulder and in Golden, Colorado, and in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, supports him. So we have this vast number of videos where Victor Hugo, attacking me, is saying I threw the case, and he's got these lawyers who support it, and he's citing Win, who is claiming Todd backs him up. It's just bizarre. And given that he's putting out more and more of these, I mean, 444 since 17 December, roughly speaking. That's 4 months. That's 111 a month. They're only 30 days in a month. So he's put out 3 or 4 of these every effing day. I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable. Ron Avery has even published a book about my case, and I was deprived of all my legal entitlements, not just the right to a trial by jury, but how the judge refused to even admit any of my proof that nobody died at Sandy Hook as evidence, for which I'm so enormously in your debt, Ron. What do you think about this Victor Hugo, Win Young, Todd Callender assault? Ron.
Well, I did not. I haven't seen all of those videos that you might be referring to, but I did see one of them where Win does talk about, and apparently he read something, and he quoted it or read something out of some filing. I can't remember which one it was or what it was, but he said, well, that just looked like they've agreed to the case or something. And I'm not even sure that he wasn't talking about Alex Jones. He
was. He talks about Alex a lot, and then he conflates me. So he says Alex threw his case.
That's a problem there too. The serious problem, because what happens over there has very little to do, even though it did affect your case. But it wasn't, it wasn't anything that you were pleading. And anyway, and I guess I didn't get around to really hearing anything that he said about your thing, other than that he thought you threw it, as well as Jones. And
and Wolfgang Halbig is very important.
Yeah.
You threw him into the mix.
First of all, unfortunately, I just kind of dismiss these kind of guys because I think they're clouds without rain. These guys just come along, they learn a little bit of something, they find a little bit of something, and they've got nothing to do. They're going nowhere. They're going to try to make a name for themselves quickly in the conspiracy circles, and they're going to be somebody by, first of all, I feel like the damaging part of this is that they believe that the government and the courts are lawful and are doing the right thing all the time. Well, this is just false. I'm so sick of people that, and this is a problem in the patriot community, is that they are killing and eating their own. Somebody goes to court and gets slaughtered because of a corrupt judges and corrupt judiciary and corrupt rules of precedent, and they get trashed or get dismissed and thrown out of court, and all the patriots come around. Well, you didn't dot the I like I told you. Now, if you'd have done what I'd have told you, you'd have crossed your T there, and you'd have been smooth sailing. You'd have cleaned up. And I'm so sick of hearing that. And I hear it all the time. I heard it when I was in court. Well, Ron, you just didn't do that. Well, I'm going to tell you, you can't get rid of sovereign immunity. You can't get rid of a lot of these rules of precedent that throw you out of court and harm you. And you can't do it by crossing your T's and dotting your I's. They're just going to slaughter you.
Let me throw in a couple more tidbits. He suppressed an affidavit from Kelly Watt. They were claiming that in the oral hearing, the Posner attorneys claimed that the death certificate I'd been sent was the same as the one attached to the complaint. Well, Kelly Watt and that she and I or some other mysterious force had altered it, that we take out the date, the state and the town, how they account for the file number, I don't know. There's no way we did anything like that. So Kelly had an affidavit in there that said, no, the published was the one that she was given by Leonard Posner. Ironically, the plaintiff who brings the case suggesting he was seeding it. But the fact of the matter is they ignored her affidavit. Not only that, but I brought two forensic document experts, both of whom confirmed not only was the death certificate I'd published fake, the death certificate attached to the complaint was fake, and two other death certificates that my publisher, Dave Gahary, had obtained from the town and I'd obtained from the state. They were also, all four of the death certificates were fake. And the judge just set them aside. He said it wasn't helpful and excluded. I mean, this is how bad it went. Ross, I know you're craving to get in. Go.
Well, the attack is on all kinds of people, not just you.
Yeah, let me add, everyone who sought to inform them or speak up for me or better inform them, like Bill, like Susan.
Or anybody that
they've been attacked.
He was attacking Dr. Shiva because Shiva ghosted him on an interview. And, he's very easily offended. He can't, he just thinks he's some kind of like a special chosen person that just deserves the utmost respect. And if he's an anti-Semite. I'm an anti-Semite too, but sometimes anti-Semites get some pushback. It's just normal, and you got to deal with it. So that's what happened with Brian, but not him, because he gets all upset about that. So it's just gone on and on and on and on. The latest one, and here's his technique. I'll give you an example. He put up a video, and he does it in the titles. And I said, well, and he's got this fan couple, I call them, Jack and Margie. And it's just like the most boring conversation that he has with them. They don't really talk about much of anything. But in the headlines are his latest foils, Jim Fetzer, Kevin Barrett. Exposing Kevin Barrett. Exposing Susan Bradford. Exposing this person. Exposing that person. It's all in the headlines. So I'm sitting there, what's in this conversation with these fan couple, and it's just pure boredom. Nothing.
Susan,
the headlines.
Susan, you were
he doesn't even substantiate his headlines. It's
right. There's nothing to support it. Susan, you were so nice to reach out to Victor to try to explain that he was off base, but he's then made you a target too.
And that was completely bizarre. I wanted to defend you because, Jim, it broke my heart to see him going after you. I mean, it was so vicious, and I could only imagine how, what it must have felt, to be on the receiving end of that. And so I reached out to him. I thought this would be like a good, I thought it was a rational email that would kind of put things at odd, at least to let him know that what he was doing was out of line, he was bullying you, and then he turned around and began attacking me. And you said that he's put a lot of words in my mouth that I haven't said, and I guess now I become a target too.
Yeah, he's master at taking things out of context.
Well, a good example is Carl Herman. You tried to send some olive branches to him. I said, Carl, don't do it. Don't do it, Carl. Just don't do it. Don't interact with this guy. And then he made Carl Herman a big target of attack. And he's got a sidekick by the name of, I'm not going to even mention his name, who does really foul stuff, really nasty stuff. I would have to say that in his immediate response to our raw deal on Wednesday, he had a rebuttal that I have just posted up wherever I can. I want people to see that because he's so psychopathic. He spends half the time talking about Russ Winter and herpes. He's just like fixated on that. That's his big attack on me, herpes. Probably 4 billion people on the planet have some form of herpes or another. And so he thinks that's, as diva and juvenile that he is, he thinks that's really going to insult me. But I'm putting it everywhere because I want to get more people to see it. I really do. I want people to listen to that rebuttal. I've got to post it I'll put it up on this one again because I'm getting so much ammunition from him. He's just giving it to me or to us with his behaviors and the way he acts that I just want to finish him. Just let people, and it's like Susan says, the only people that really follow him are total psychos after that. But I think he's on his last legs.
Bill, your thoughts? He's turned on you too. Go right ahead.
Unpack there. A lot of different people that are potentially liable for damage and defamation, and what actions can be taken, whether you're looking at restitution, reimbursement, or injunctions from a judge, declarative judgments. Anyway, the bigger issue of overriding this is the attack on Jim's efforts in the courts and the false equivalencies that Winter making legally between Jim and Alex. And we broke that down pretty thoroughly on October 9th. And I could touch on it here, the major points, if you like, Jim, or what his narratives are and how off base they are in relation to your litigation.
Go ahead, because many in the audience may not. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay. Well, so Win Young's an attorney, and he's been on Todd Callender's show, and Todd pretty much is put out the message. He's backing Win. If you go to, let me just put this into context. If you go to Operation Madcap, Win Young, you will see the videos that Win and Victor have put out, also Todd and Win, and then the latter part of that whole page is an attack on what he calls the gurus, Professor Fetzer and Wolfgang. And so initially, of course, I know Victor from doing raw deals with you, Jim, and I didn't have any personal conflicts with Victor. One of the things about this whole movement that we're trying to all get on board is divide and conquer. There's so many psyops within it, so much misinformation, disinformation, that sometimes and I'll be honest, we had our conflict, but that was inter-email, which Victor was privy to, and that is where we kept it for the most part.
It's very important to inject here that Victor has gone ahead of these emails from our conflicts that we were having, private emails. I don't know how he even got a hold of them, and is now putting them out in the public. And so why would anybody even correspond with this guy? Why would Stu Peters want to have any dealings with this guy? At any moment, he could turn an email against you, anything that's getting misspoken, and he will just pick it up on his site and publish it. And he's habitual at it. So any kind of shit storm that's going on, any kind of smack that's going on, like, for instance, that went on with you and me, Bill, he'll put it up there for the whole world to see. And that's what he's doing currently. That is really low life behavior. That's just totally psychopathic. And I'm going to take those. I'm going to take every one of those clips, and I'm putting it on my site because I want people to see it. I'm not hiding that at all. I'm using it.
Bill, go ahead.
Okay. We have the court of public opinion, which is what we're addressing now. Then there's also the court of law, which Ron appropriately points out is completely corrupt. And I've experienced that. We all have. So, my position is, and I'm here to support anyone I can. And Susan, God bless everybody who's together here today, is that one of the ways we can overcome this is just show us all working together well. Like,
Bill, I wanted you to address the false equivalence of Alex Jones' case. Okay.
I will. Yeah. Okay. So what you have is Lynn is making the assertion that the plaintiffs, which are all CIA ops, we know this was a drill, would never bring a case in court unless they knew the defendants would throw it. That's the very first premise he has. And then the second one is, in particular to Jim, that because Jim didn't have author and writer's insurance, he's controlled opposition, and that played into Jim throwing the case. That's the basic outline. And what he's doing there is he does make some good little arguments. Go ahead. In relation, go ahead, do you want to say something?
Yeah. He claims I should have moved it to federal court because it was entailed First Amendment and diversity, because my co-author, co-editor, Mike Palachuk, resides in Minnesota, and Dave Gahary, the publisher, in Florida. It should have gone to federal court, but I couldn't even find an attorney to represent me. And I had done nothing wrong in the book. And even after having gone through this, I find nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong in the book. I had good reason at the time to declare the death certificate was fake. It was fake. It's been affirmed by 2 forensic document experts. But I got to say, I'm only offering that hypothetically. Would you believe I'm under a judge's order that I cannot say what I was sued for in the book? I mean, there you have it. So just understand. I'm saying this just to let you know what the case was all about. But the fact is, it was a judge who was excluding all my evidence. And then Wynn coming up with a different theory of how it could have been argued to draw the conclusion that I tossed the case when I'm still in court fighting the case. How can I have tossed a case I'm still fighting? Bill, I mean, is this not as absurd as it gets?
Well, you bring out some very good points. The first thing is, there is no merit to any of these liability cases. We've got all the evidence and more to prove that it was a FEMA drill. So there's no merits to any of these legal actions to begin with. The only cases that have merit would be Wolf and you, Jim, and other parties to actually get these cases dismissed as vexatious and frivolous and then sue for damage and defamation. That would be those cases would have merit. None of these do. These are all psyops. Okay, so you're right, Jim. You are exposing the PSYOP pursuant to the Smith Modernization Act for gun control, for restrictions on freedom of speech. You have people intimidated, they can be offered into bankruptcy. This is all of MK Ultra, PSYOP.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let me just comment on the insurance thing. How does having insurance or not? Publishers have insurance. I don't know, writers have, Susan, you know, writers having insurance, and insurance would just pay off a claim if it were legitimate, but the claim was not legitimate. And how would that affect my argument in court, whether I had insurance or not? It's totally irrelevant. I mean, this is just ridiculous, Susan.
He's an insurance attorney. So, and my understanding is that he represents insurance companies. That's what I gathered from his online profile. And so that's the argument that he takes, that if he's not representing you, that's what he
He's an insurance attorney. I should have...
to your host.
I am going to give up the call-in number, but I want to observe that with so many guests here today, you're not likely to get a lot of time. You can say your piece, 608-957-8727, 608-957-8727. Ron, you had several points to make. You got 3 books there, one you've written about the case. I mean, did I get a fair shake in the courts?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, Jim.
I said, did I get a fair shake in the?
For some reason, is not very loud.
Did I get a fair shake in the courts, my friend?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Did I get a fair shake in the courts? Was I dealt with honestly by the courts of Wisconsin?
Not at all. Well, I want to make one more point though, to show how corrupt the whole summary judgment methodology is in Wisconsin. If they would have filed the same suit in Texas, you could have had, first of all, you wouldn't have had a summary judgment. They couldn't pull that off. And if had they won it, you could have taken it up on appeal. And under the rules of summary judgment in Texas, it would have had to be overturned. Because in Texas, you have to take the non-movance evidence as true. All of it. You have to take it as true. So whether or not it was true, what you said about the death certificate, in Texas, they would have to say, hey, Jim Fetzer, we have to, on a summary judgment, we have to say that everything he said here and all this evidence is true. And now, if Posner agrees with Fetzer, then we can look at whether just in the law alone, which one prevails. Well, he couldn't have prevailed at all, say, then. But in Wisconsin, they don't have to take the non-movance evidence as true. They can take the movance evidence as true, which was Posner, and that's exactly what happened. So anybody in Wisconsin can be screwed in a summary judgment because you're going to have a non-jury trial in a summary judgment in Wisconsin.
And, of course, that's why I took the case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. They're not adhering to the rule of law, the Seventh Amendment. There were disputed facts all over the place, which is why the judge went out of his way to not allow any of my evidence, lest there be disputed facts, lest there have to be a jury trial, when he had a predetermined conclusion. Keith, you've been listening to all this just kind of naively. I don't suppose you were familiar with any of it. Give us your thoughts.
Well, Jim, I've read your court briefing that you sent me, and I see the flaws of the state. I mean, I always look back to 12 Angry Men about how the different biases of the jurors themselves. One wanted to get to a baseball game, whatever it was. The other one had a messenger thing. I mean, to me, whenever you try to corner these filthy rats on anything, like the World Trade Center bombing in '93 or so, you know, that these guys have got it all planned out. And I believe that the court system itself is at failure here. And, of course, it's because it exposes so much. By the way, Jim, I don't get much time out here, but I sent you a clip on email that I would really love to play on the show, but I'd like to do just an intro to it, if you could, please. And you mentioned you wanted to get into this digital stuff that they're really doing.
See, this is a classic case of harassment and
of course,
cyberbullying. Yeah.
Yeah. And as far as all this stuff with, say, Victor Hugo and stuff like that, all these ad hominem attacks, as Russell had, I think it was Russell or it was William that mentioned, while we're bickering back and forth about all this, the main important deal is like the $500 billion to AI, 48-hour vaccines. We're not talking about that. More important things, you know. So we're bantering back and forth about other co-hosts and stuff. And so the message, which is more important, is not getting out there. Like I noticed YouTube filled it with all these stupid things about a helicopter going down and a medic died. Well, what about all the medics just killed by Israel over there and put into a mass grave? You know, so we're not talking. Yeah,
all that, but I don't want to deviate for that right now. You know, we'll get around. We do have a caller, 501 area code. Caller, give us your first name and state and join the conversation. 501.
Gabriel from Arkansas.
Oh, Gabriel, go right ahead.
Professor Fetzer, great news this morning. You mentioned Freemasonry early on in the news on one of your guests, and I'm a Rosicrucian and a Freemason, but I'm really quite an amateur expert and historian in both of the subjects. I know more about these two subjects than anything else, but I kind of wanted to. There's a lot of misunderstanding about that, but I wanted to ask you if it's okay. This morning they had Blue Origin claim to have the first flight into space with an all-female crew. I don't think it's even possible for them to go to space because they can't make it through the Van Allen belt. Professor,
well, they can't escape low Earth orbit. I don't think, except with unmanned. I mean, manned, we don't have the propulsion power to do it. We certainly didn't have it way back when in 69 and 70. And I doubt very much we have it now. But continue, Gabriel. Go right ahead.
Well, I'm wondering, and do you think this morning, do you think that they even went as high as low Earth orbit? That was going to be my first question.
You're hitting me cold because I was even unaware with a flight. But is anyone here, Keith, you on top of this? Anyone else here like to field Gabriel's question?
I think the Su-34 can do low Earth upper atmosphere type stuff there, but I don't think they have as you mentioned there before, the technology to actually get into space. I mean, there are satellites and stuff, but you're not going to see jets or launch from Earth to be able to go up into space and sustain a flight up there. I looked at those Apollo things. They show a little bitty air tank on those things. Seriously, you think that's going to last 3 days there and 3 days back, when you got a scuba tank? When we did the breakdown on that latest landing thing.
The landing vehicle, it was put there in somebody's garage.
Lunar lander.
Yeah.
Looks like a Tinker Toy. Ron, go ahead, Ron.
Well, you mean even, what about this International Space Station?
Yeah.
And Elon Musk saving those guys, and they were up there how long? 278 days.
Yeah, what was their food supply? Can you imagine how much food it would take two people for that period of time? It would have filled a room. They didn't have any supplies for that. It's just absurd.
Jim, here's another one. The ISS. I'm sorry, Russell.
In non-gravity situation, you're going to get blood clots, and you're going to have huge health problems, and you're never even going to be able to walk. It's like being bedridden. So that's a non-starter too.
Gabriel,
don't tell me now, because I really like this Elon Musk rocket that comes down and the arms grab it. I'm telling you, I'm impressed with that. I see Flash Gordon. We used to watch that on Saturday morning. And they were even the same shape and had little fins on the back. They come down. If he can do that, he's good enough for me.
The other one I think is interesting is the ISS space station is supposed to have a hole in it.
Gabriel, go ahead, Gabriel.
Well, it sounds like all of these gentlemen, and I would have to agree with all of you, are questioning whether the International Space Station itself is actually in low Earth orbit.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, Jim, do you remember when the ISS was supposed to have a hole in it? And they had to plug it up. It was on the Russian side or something like that. How long did this leak? Where'd the air to refill these ISS come from?
Right. Why didn't the whole thing just fall apart at that point? I think there's a lot of very peculiar things here. Gabriel, do you have any other comment you'd like to toss into the hopper?
When the women landed, each one began to describe having a spiritual experience. One got a message of unity, that we're all in this together on earth. Another received the message to do better and be better as an example for others to follow. Yeah. While another described taking the flight for spiritual healing and so forth.
This is all B-grade script writing.
Bunch of new age stuff. Huh?
B-grade script writing.
Have a vision that we should all support Israel.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I don't know how far you want me to go with this. I was going to ask you, because I thought you referred to yourself as an atheist before. I was going to ask you about that, and then I was going to talk a little bit about the Freemasonry. I'm not sure if you want to do that now or not.
Agnostic.
You.
Well, why'd you hang on? We got another caller, 816. Join the conversation. Brian, go right ahead.
Yeah, it's me. You know, you were talking about, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to comment on the Shabbat and Frankus, because it's on the internet and it's on Winter Watch, and I just don't see why people can't get this connected. Rabbi Shabbat Zevi showed up June 6th of 1666 claiming he was the Christ, and there was a huge plague then. There was a London fire. There was Cestui QV, which you can look up on the internet. He was the Antichrist. So, and even Jacob Frank says that he's the reincarnation of Rabbi Shabbat Zevi. And so it's right there in front of everybody's face, but they just can't see it, and they wear that upside down cross, and Elon Musk has he has that breastplate that he wears with Bathmood on the front of it, and below it is the upside down cross. It's the same as Melinda Gates, and I see it all over the place with them. I look for those things, but that's who you're dealing with Shabbat and Frankus. You're dealing with people who worship the Antichrist. It's simple.
Well, thanks for that. Susan, would you like to add more?
I think what Brian said was spot on. I think that's spot on.
Bill, your thoughts?
Yeah, hi, Brian. Haven't talked to you in a while. I'm right on board with Brian saying 100%. Regarding the Falcon 9, let's not forget it had a freeloader, was a mouse that was running on the Falcon 9. Did you all see that?
Yeah.
So in outer space, mice in space now, according to hitting a ride on Elon's rocket. I didn't know that.
A stowaway.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Bill. Go ahead.
Touch on real quick, just to clarify for people, jump back into briefly. Okay, so wrongs without remedies, Moonrock Books lawyers bailed on Jim. Jim was left unprotected. He was a defendant in the case with them by rights. They're the publisher. They should have been defending Jim. Well, they bailed. They caved.
The oddity, Bill, was that a company has to have a lawyer, but they had two, and I said, Dave, shouldn't one of these guys be representing me and Mike, or the editors of the book? And it didn't happen, so we were left without any representation. They treated me like a piñata. I mean, once Moonrock settled, and once Mike withdrew, I mean, I was just there suspended, man. They were taking whacks right and left. Ron will tell you, he has a whole archive of the documents, and I was getting my arguments out there, but they were having no impact because
why don't we get Ron and Lynn Young together for a debate?
I'd love it. Yeah, I'd love it. I think the guy could learn something. I really do. I don't think he knows what he's talking about. And I think once he heard what the real situation was and what the documents, what the filings had in there, and what the defense was that Jim put up, I think he'd change his tune.
Now, is Todd Callender kind of communicating that he did not give Victor permission to use his name? And
yeah. One of my messages to him, he wrote back.
This is important, everybody. Everybody's listening, because this is one of the things that Victor's really hung his hat on.
Yeah, he said he really hadn't understood what was going on here, and he didn't think his name ought to be cited in support of this. And, I mean, he said that to win. But you look at Wynn's side, there's been no change whatsoever. So I wrote Todd a very emphatic letter this morning, and I copied all of you that this is ludicrous, that they're making these completely absurd claims about a lawsuit where I'm still active in court, that I've thrown it when I took it all the way to the Supreme Court, and they're dragging his good name in there. And then he has to tell him to take down every video that cites him in relation to this case. And that would be a giant step forward. But I can't understand, after having written to him several times, given him links where you can see these hundreds and hundreds of absurd videos, he hasn't done it already. I mean, what the hell is wrong with Todd Callender?
Well, I saw that exchange. And Jim and I talked this morning, and Jim put out a very good letter, the cease and desist request that he put that out very clearly to Wynn, stop associating Jim in this manner. And so, the thing about lawyers, Jim, is they're always looking to reduce exposure and liability. They don't like to admit any wrong. That could impeach them he did say he didn't want to be named in any legal proceedings. So I think he's walking a tightrope, but we'll see what happens from there. But that's a good first step. I think that certainly goes a step in the right direction. For anyone who's not familiar with this, our April 9th video covers it in depth. There's so much to talk here, especially I wanted to touch on the FOIA hearings and some of that information regarding Wolfgang, and how anyone who studied the FOIA hearings would never make the assertion that Wolfgang, the quote-unquote guru, threw the case. I mean, it's just so preposterous. It's very sad. And it upsets me that Wolf's character and your character have been attacked on this, but without getting deeper into the legal arguments. I don't think we have the time today. Maybe do
I volunteered to be a witness in Alex Jones' cases, both in Connecticut and in Austin, and in the Remington case. And neither side wanted me in there. I think the insurance companies who settled, with Remington feel that eventually going to be gun laws that require insurance for weapons, and they're going to make a bundle. So they actually wanted to go for it. They didn't want me in there exposing the whole thing was a sham to promote gun control. And it's just shameless what's going on in the courts. Alex just had an interview with Tucker, where he told Tucker that it was a show trial, that he was under pressure from the parents and the Department of Justice. So, what the hell? And, of course, we got Robert Barnes, who said he went into the courtroom there in Austin. It was unlike any courtroom he'd ever seen, that they had 3 cameras set up, one on the jury, and that it looked to him like a made-for-TV movie. And that's exactly what it was, The Truth versus Alex Jones. And just for the whole audience to know, if they go onto my blog at jameshfetzer.org, go to Fake News, The Truth versus Alex Jones, and if you scroll down, you can download the redacted edition of the book where I took out the sentences over which I was sued. You can download it. And there's also a Sandy Hook Truth Memorandum I prepared with Robert David Steele, sent to then-President Donald J. Trump, where I had one sentence declaring the death certificate to be fake. You can download that, too, in a redacted edition. So everyone should take advantage, because they banned the book. They've taken the book. They've taken it away from me by this ridiculous lawsuit where I have 4 appeals before the Wisconsin Court of Appeals to reverse it, 4 of them. And frankly, I think the evidence is so damn good, they're going to have a hard time denying reversing. So we'll see how it plays out. But meanwhile, you can get that book there. Keith, did you want to add Yeah, Ron. Go ahead, Ron.
I just want to say one thing, because it's just amazing how far they've gone with this little sheet of paper with the claiming it's a real death certificate. In reality, a real death certificate has to be one that's an original, that actually has the embossed thing on it, and it's signed and sealed and numbered by all the officials and all of that. It's the kind of thing you get from the, from the state, statistics, death statistics. So how can they talk about that? I don't think there was a lawful death certificate in the whole bunch of them.
Sure.
Because it would have a lawful death certificate would have to be one that the judge would see in some kind of probate process. You look at it and go, oh yeah, well, this is the original. It's from here's the embossed thing. And remember, the judge even talked about that you couldn't see the embossed seal anymore because but how can they talk about that and then in the same breath say that it's a lawful death certificate when you can't see the damn seal on it?
They're doing the sketchy stuff all the time. I mean, I was talking at length again with Bill, because Bill had been schooling me on a lot of stuff. And, the whole FOIA thing where they tried to get the tapes of the parking lot and the
dash cam. Yeah.
Apparently they only produced 3 out of 32. And then the 3, I guess, that they produced didn't have timestamps on them or anything. I mean, that's kind of the same type of thing you're talking about with the certificates. That in my mind is an admission of guilt.
Oh, sure. There's so many ways.
Correct,
yeah,
Bill?
Jim, can I add something on here?
Sure, Keith. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's important to think about those death certificates, because you have to realize how they play to agendas. Remember, AOC was in New York City with Chuck Schumer, standing there on the corner telling people that if they changed the cause of death as to COVID, then FEMA will give them $8,500. That's a felony for each count every time they change those death certificates, and they were trying to inflate it. And remember, this whole COVID thing started in the United States. It wasn't China.
Yeah.
But it's important, though, see? So when you start fabricating this, where AOC tells people to go back to their medical examiner and stuff like that to have that changed, this shows you the amount of fraud that was perpetrated on the American people as well as the world there.
That's a personal question. When my father died at 96 years old, they put on his death certificate prostate cancer. Well, he had prostate cancer for like 15 years, but it was kind of benign. It's not what killed him. Why did they do that? Somebody
well,
pay
Russell, remember the motorcyclist that got killed in a head-on collision, and they listed his death as COVID?
Right.
I'm not talking about COVID. I'm talking how
I know, but this is how they fraudulently do things to manipulate statistics. Gun shootings, the same thing.
Okay.
Gabriel and Brian, I want to thank you both for calling in. You could add a sentence apiece or so. Gabriel first.
What I'll do is I'm going to call you at 3:00 at your later show.
Sure. Okay, that's fine, Gabriel. Brian, do you want to add? Brian, are you still here? I think Brian's outright departed the scene.
If you got time, have Bill address what I brought up about the...
Bill. Bill, you got an opinion about Russ's father's death certificate?
No, about the tapes.
The tapes.
The FOIA.
Okay. Good. What you have is 2 set of videos that Wolf was trying to get the dash cam. You have the Newtown Police Department and you have the state police. So I know we only have very short time left. Let me jump to the Connecticut State Police. The judge decided, and when the last hearing I saw, which was February 18, 2016, there was a subsequent hearing I can't find anywhere in March. But the judge decided that the FOIA were actionable to acquire these dash cam videos, and Will put out a request for 32, best of my recollection, of all the cruisers and the police. The 3 he got were just the police cruisers going from Bethany Police Station, the troopers, to the parking lot. Nothing what happened in the parking lot. They claimed due to technical difficulties they couldn't provide it. Right? So Now, regarding the Newtown police, that was another matter. That one ties in what Russ was saying about whether it was defragmented because of time and date stamps missing. But again, we could do another show on this. I know I'm looking at the clock. We're almost out of time. But you had two issues. And we had full obstruction. We had witness tampering. We had contempt of court. The FOIA hearings are a total violation of the rule of law. And, yeah, but we don't have time to get into that. But
yeah, a teaser for our next show. That's
Ron, you've invested so much in this, Amber. What do you think about all this cyber attacks and all that? Go ahead, your thoughts. Ron.
I don't know anything about the cyber attacks. I just wanted to say that I like what Bill said about the presumption that Wynn was making, that they wouldn't have sued you had they not thought you were going to take a dive. Why couldn't they have said that about the government? They wouldn't have sued you unless they'd have known the courts were going to cheat you out of your rights.
Yeah,
that's the real.
Excellent.